dedicated to connecting individuals, the campus, and the greater St. Louis community under four main principles: dialogue, understanding, diversity, and change. They do this through forums, awareness events, and action days. Please join me in welcoming Cambrie Nelson to the stage.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Really? Come on. One more time. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Tonight, we gather to honor Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And it is my personal honor to share a couple of words and thoughts about a personal hero that has greatly influenced my journey. Tonight, we commemorate a man who marched when others stood idle, who sat in when all demanded him to leave. A man who did not just embrace diversity, but demonstrated it, showing us that change is genuinely a constant win amidst the stagnant humidity of inequality. Here, he asks us to trade our certainty of a world teeming with injustice for the reassuring uncertainty of possibility. He called for us to replace our periods with question marks. See, tonight I am here to talk about the glorious conception of not just the man, but of an idea, action. But before we delve deeper into this concept, I want to ask you to close your eyes and to reflect for just a moment. Try not to fall asleep. The theme of this evening is shattering ceilings, celebrating success in pursuit of the dream. So take a moment and visualize what your own personal ceiling looks like. Perhaps it's glass, maybe it's brick, or even barbed wire. Then again, perhaps it looks like social injustice, economic pressure, or struggling with a failing relationship. Please open your eyes and keep it in mind throughout the speech, please. See, when I think of my own family ceilings, I think about my mother. Now, I don't really know how many of y'all have a mama from the South. And when I say the South, I mean the deep South. The type of South that pronounces church as church. The type of no-nonsense South that tells you to get your ashy elbows off the kitchen table. And the South where birthdays, the 4th of July, and the flag days were called family reunions. See, indeed, this is a South filled with rich and celebratory culture, but also uncrippled with the leprosy of iniquity. A South where in the 1950s, my mother spent her childhood picking cotton on an old plantation with her 10 brothers and sisters for money. A young teen in Georgia, her dreams of completing her education were disrupted by the needs of her family, a ceiling resembling splintered hands of a dream deferred. So let us also think of our larger ceilings, the ones that extend their reach beyond the surfaces of our life. Yes, we do live in a different time than Dr. King's, and the face of our ceilings are comprised of different attributes. But nonetheless, these ceilings urge us to stay contained and paralyzed in what we may call fear. In fear, Dr. King saw opportunity. And so I pose this challenge to each of you. Can we stop letting fear rest on the front porch of our eyelids? Can we blink them and see a world beyond these ceilings? Dr. King did just that. He shattered these ceilings by catalyzing a movement, by moving a nation beyond its bookmarked history, by moving words, by moving his voice, and by moving hearts. Tonight's theme is not merely having ceilings in pursuit of the dream, but shattering ceilings in pursuit of the dream. So quickly call back into remembrance your ceiling, what it looked like, and the lingering question you may have had about how to break it, because we have just reached our first ceiling shattering tool, movement. We must remember that the central word in movement is move. So when I say movement, I'm not only referring to universal action, but rather the action, however large or small, that follows the acknowledgement of a limitation, personal or otherwise. For the remainder of this speech, I ask that you see movement as the architectural blueprint for social change. For example, Dr. King's approach to the challenges of his era was to remove periods and to insert question marks. In other words, King did not just merely provide solutions to a stumbling nation, but rather saw nonviolent inquiry as the key to revolutionary change. He made us question why the world routinely spun about its axis of discrimination. He made perpetrators question how they could spit into a face and punch at an arm that turned its spit into words and never lifted a fist. He made victims question their status as victims and turned victimization into cooperation, self-emancipation, and realized dreams. His questions made individuals walk more than just a mile in his shoes, but walk all the way to the steps of Washington and all the way to the Birmingham jail where he wrote, "Too long has our beloved Southland been bogged down in the tragic efforts to live in monologue rather than dialogue." Question marks rather than periods provide this space for dialogue. So I ask that you move and that you make questions the central stride of this movement. So let us stride to our next ceiling-shattering tool. Often, when someone is finally motivated to shatter his or her own ceiling, he or she perceives time to be a daunting barrier. I offer a perspective that views time as a universal gift rather than a burden, as a concept that connects us all rather than an excuse for timidity and inaction. See, my mother saw time as an agent in her attempt to move past her ceilings, and not only started college at age 46, but finished it by age 51. In Letters from a Birmingham Jail, King responds to a man that asks him to remain hesitant in the face of injustice. Dr. King responds, "Such an attitude stems from the tragic misconception of time, from the strangely irrational notion that there is something in the very flow of time that will inevitably cure all ills. Actually, time itself is neutral. It can be used either destructively or constructively. We must use time creatively in the knowledge that the time is always ripe to do right. So we must redefine the way we experience time and make a conscious and critical shift from time being a limiting barrier to time being a resource for empowerment. When we hear that in the youth of his 20s, Dr. King was addressing a nation as the president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, it causes us to see him the way we tend to view many of our other role models. Often when we think of our other heroes, such as Dr. King, Mother Teresa, or Mohandas Gandhi, we view them as exempt from time's limitations. Because of their great accomplishments, we tend to forget that their minutes were only 60 seconds, their hours 60 minutes, and their days, just like ours, 24 hours. We see them as superhuman and outside of these constructs. No, it was their very humanity that makes them truly phenomenal. See, I'm not asking us to revoke their hero status, but rather to raise ourselves up, to open our arms and to embrace their daringness and their ability to see strength and utility in their gift of time. My challenge to each of you is to see in one day an entire year. Begin to see the sand in your hourglass as vast as an ocean floor. See, it seems to me that the only thing more futile than allowing procrastination and fear to immobilize movement is having millions of motivated individuals moving in several different directions. What then becomes our compass? Vision, our next ceiling-shattering tool. Vision is not just seeing things how they ought to be rather than how they are. Vision is living the difference that we seek to make. My mother, an elementary school teacher, lived this difference and saw through teaching that she still had a desire to learn. Her vision in turn taught my brother and I how to shatter our ceilings. Dr. King's speeches always seem to ask, after shattering, what lies beyond the ceiling? What can we see? What is our focal point? In the following passage, he opens up the heart of one of his visions through describing what he sees beyond his current circumstances. He claims, "This is our hope. This is the faith with which I return to the South. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain